Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Bob the Bookerer, and today I wanted to talk about an author who means a lot to me, and actually where kind of wonderfully coincidentally there is a sort of another sort of specific celebration is not the right word, but kind of commemoration of her life, and that is Angela Carter. She is a British author who I absolutely adore, and she sort of around 30 years ago today sadly passed away at quite a young age as well, actually. So, you know, there's just sort of so much as well where we probably would have had a lot more of writing from this fantastic woman. And she is an author who I was introduced to by one of my old English teachers, who himself was a fan. And I think I was sort of going through a bit of a magical realism kind of phase. I say phase. I'd still enjoy it, but he very much sort of encouraged me to kind of go and check out more of her work. A part of me feels like maybe how age appropriate was some of it at like 17, reading the Magic Toyshop, which, you know, has a Leda and the Swan reference. I won't go into what that is. If you know, you know. It involves some kind of assault. And Angela Carter's work is full of sex and sexuality and sort of really a real sort of richness around that kind of sensuality of characters with each other, and sensuality in the language. And so she is an author who I absolutely adore, and I just thought I'd maybe take a little moment to talk about some of her books that I've absolutely loved, and also just generally a little bit about who she is and who she was. So part of my love for her as well is sort of a weird kind of claiming of her as a sort of local hero. She sort of spent a good amount of time in Croydon, which is where I'm from, for my sins. And I think there was something really profound about that for me as a child, sort of realizing that there was a writer who was from around here, and not in a kind of way of like, nobody ever comes this way, because, you know, I think I always just assumed that writers were very much from a very specific area, and they all did sort of certain things and had a very specific upbringing and all those sorts of things. And I just remember there being a moment of reading an Angela Carter book where she describes a bus journey and suddenly realizing that that was a bus I took. And it sounds really minuscule in so many ways, but it was such a revelation to sort of just be like, hang on, is Angela Carter on the 250? Does she go on the 250? And just this real sort of moment. And I just have absolutely adored so much of what I've read of hers. And there's still so much more of her work that I really want to go and check out, particularly her poetry. But I wanted to talk about some of my absolute favourites here as well. So I think I mentioned this in the sort of the video for my birthday around sort of 32 books that shaped me, and Burning Your Boats was absolutely one of these. She is in this sort of set of short stories. She takes myths and fairy tales and plays around with them and repurposes them and does new things with them. A lot of the time that just means they end up sort of being really violent and sexual and kind of feminist and queer. And I mean, that for me is a perfect short story. And I just love her so much for this. And, you know, this collection, you often see, you know, the sort of more standard, as it were, short stories like Bluebeard being retold, but sometimes you also get kind of other ones that you wouldn't quite expect. And this was sort of something that meant so much to me. I love myths and fairy tales. I love them kind of being made kind of queer and feminist and kind of updated. And then she, I wrote my dissertation at uni about this as well, using this collection and a few others to sort of play around with some of those ideas, because I was just so interested in it. And if you've not checked them out before, I do really highly recommend. This is I think quite a good gateway into Angela Carter. It's a bit of a strong start in the sense that some of these short stories are like, okay, Angela, not quite sure what we're doing here, but it feels like a really good introduction to who she was, because she was so interested in those sort of relationships between men and women, relationships between violence and sex and love and so many other things. She had such an interesting perspective on so many things, and it's why I absolutely love her. speaking of which, she also wrote a book about the Marquis de Sade, and about sort of sex and sadism and various other things in the Sadian Woman. And I remember absolutely loving this and reading this at uni, and again being like, what am I reading here? This is very strange. And for those of you who've been to who've done an English lit degree in an English university, there tends to be quite a lot of focus on Freud. Go figure. And so what's really interesting is she is also someone who was quite interested by Freud, by various other kind of thoughts on sex and gender and everything else. And so something like the Sadian Woman brings in, like the Marquis de Sade brings in ideas around Freud, brings in everything else. And so I just remember reading this during my uni and being like, I'm going to quote the hell out of this because I can, and because I kind of need it for my essay. But she is just also just such a versatile writer in so many other ways. I mentioned recently Wise Children in a monthly wrap up, and it was so much fun revisiting that book, this sort of vaudevillian, fanciful, theatrical book full of that kind of a really sort of specific voice and dialect from the sort of southeast of London. This really kind of estuary English. I love how well she captured that in this very specific period, but also just how fun it is. The same for like the Magic Toyshop, or so many of her other books. I've got a couple of others here as well. The Passion of New Eve, which I definitely read sort of when I was about 17 or 18, and then cannot remember a single thing about and want to go back and reread. So this is sort of part of a little goal of mine, I think, for this year, is to finally go through and reread the old Angela Carter books I have read, read the ones I haven't read before, and just sort of, you know, just kind of really check out this author again, because she means so much to me and she's just such a brilliant writer. And similarly, Nights at the Circus, which I feel like I've read, but I keep on having things where I'm like, maybe not. And this, I think, also won the James Tate Black Prize. So in a sort of, in a way of bringing it back to prizes, because that always seems to happen, I might well sort of check this out and check out maybe more of the prize around it as well. But just absolutely such a fabulous writer, and just so richly imaginative. She's not afraid to kind of, you know, really embody these tales and find the sort of the undercurrent, the thing that's unspoken, the thing that's kind of edgy and not right and strange about everything, and really bring it back into these stories. And that's what I love about her. And she's so great. And I will keep rambling on about how much I love her. Also, as a sort of final thing, this is something that I spotted in a bookshop a few years ago. Well, I say a few, I'm getting old. It was about 10, 15 years ago. And this is a copy of Germinal by Émile Zola. And you might think at first, well, that's not really Angela Carter. I mean, you're right, it's not. But you may notice a little sticker that says, from the library of Angela Carter. And this was basically a book that she had previously owned, and it's also very hard to see there, but there's like a little Angela written in pencil. And so essentially this is a book that she once owned, or at least this bookshop told me so. I think they were basically clearing out old books of hers, and I'm guessing she had quite a substantial library, because they were fairly chilled about giving these books away. And well, I say giving, I mean, I think I bought it for like £2 or something. Honestly, if there were a fire, this is probably the first thing I'm saving. You know, my family first, then this. But I think it's just, there's something so magical about it. And I think particularly for me as a sort of 17 or 18-year-old who was just absolutely loving reading her work, to then see something that she had touched and that had sort of inspired her, and, well, potentially inspired her, I don't know, was really interesting. And it just has a really special place in my heart. So this has just been me absolutely rambling about how much I love Angela Carter, but I really want to try and read some of her books this year. I'd love to read along with any of you out there who are really interested in doing so. I'd also really love to hear some good recommendations of Angela Carter books that you've absolutely loved. I'm really keen especially to go and check out her poems. I know that there are so many of them out there, and I just really want to read them. But that's been me rambling about Angela Carter, who, you know, would, you know, it's so interesting to think about what she would have still been doing if she'd still been around and still writing. But we were very lucky to have the time that Angela was alive and still beautiful, still more beautiful now, just to be able to enjoy her work for what it all was. I've been Bob the Bookerer, rambling about Angela Carter. Take care. Speak to you all soon. Bye bye.